Hey guys, Broadwaypuppet here. So, a lot has happened since I last published a video. 4 years ago. Yeah. So anyway, considering how my last sort of video format took me forever long to do, and I enjoy making videos and putting them up, that's probably something I'm gonna do, less and less sort of the sit-down, very scripted, very heavily edited sort of thing. However, since I've last published, it sort of seems musical theater YouTube channels have been popping up more and more on the YouTube, and they've been taking, a bit less of a sort of nostalgia critic-esque approach and more of a Vlog Brothers, I guess, esque approach. So kind of inspired by that, I'm gonna try, in order to get some, videos out faster, to, provide some more quality, hopefully Broadway content to viewers. I'm gonna try that format a little more, which is not as heavily scripted, not as heavily edited, just sort of being able to blog about something that I'm thinking about musical theater-wise. So the topic I want to talk about today is the musical Big Fish, which is an interesting topic to talk about. It was a book way back in the 90s, and then it was made into a movie directed by Tim Burton, and then back in 2012, I think it was, Andrew Lippa and Susan Stroman, the rest of their creative team adapted it into a musical. And this musical was, it had its out-of-town tryout in Chicago, and it got pretty good reviews. Then it transferred to Broadway, and reviews were very mixed. People were saying, oh, it's too overly sentimental, it's too sappy, it doesn't mean anything, blah, blah, blah. And I went and saw this show at a local high school last year, and I saw it twice, because this show was fantastic. I don't understand why it got the reviews it did. I mean, a lot of it is sort of these high and mighty Broadway, critics are like, oh, it's so too wholesome, too sentimental. Oh, we can't deal with that. No, it has to have swearing, and this is something to take our conservative grandmas to. I think that was a line from a review I read, which I thought was really good. And I found that kind of obnoxious, to be honest. But fantastic show. It tells a story of a father who, in order to sort of make up for his lousy parenting, he was a traveling salesman, didn't get to be at home a lot. He would tell all these tall tales to his son about, his life and how he did all these fantastic things. None of them were true. Like, he met a witch who told him how he would die, and he befriended a giant, and he saved a general in a war from an assassination, and worked for a werewolf at a circus. Just crazy stuff like that. But it basically creates this whole myth where he's like, he's the hero. He's the hero of his own story, to sort of hope that his son sees him as a hero and not the lousy dad who's barely home because he's off being a traveling salesman all the time. And it explores a lot of really cool themes. Familial connection, we got familial dysfunction, legacy, how do you want to be remembered? Why do you want to be remembered the way you want to be remembered? Realism versus fantasy, and, what's an acceptable amount of either of them, because it doesn't say, just the dad is right by telling all these tall tales to make up for, not being the best dad. And, it's not saying the son is okay, because the son grows up and becomes frustrated with his dad's fantasy world, and, it's not saying that's okay to just completely put away the world of fantasy, because, oh, you're logical and blah, blah, blah. And it has a lot of these really cool themes, and Musical Theater Match, I was watching his Show of the Week segment, and he did Big Fish a few months ago, and he mentioned how a lot of people may have felt it was a bit too close to home, like the way they portray this family connection could be very relatable to a lot of people, and the way they portray this dysfunction could hit a bit too close to home and make it uncomfortable for people to watch. And I think that's a valid thing to talk about with this musical. Does it sort of portray this family connection in a way that hits really close to home with people? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's really cool that we have a musical that touches people like that. And, by the ending, it's a big sob fest. I guarantee you there's going to be at least someone in the audience crying, because the dad's dying of cancer, and spoiler alert, sorry, and, the son takes him to the waterfronts, and all the people from his stories are there, and it's gorgeous. And, that's probably where people are like, oh, it's too sentimental, it's going for cheap sentimentality. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing, and I don't think the sentimentality is cheap, because it does have that substance behind it of showing the problems in this family and how the two sort of reconcile their worldviews. But there's something specifically with this musical that I want to talk about. So early on in the show, Edward, the dad, tells the story of how he met a witch as a kid. He met a witch who told him his fortune, specifically how he would die. And she sings this whole song, you know, the ones who face their fears lead the most interesting lives. Life begins when you know how it ends. I've seen clips from both its out-of-town tryout in Chicago and its Broadway run. And in the witch song in Chicago, the witch goes,
tell me what you want, a big life, and tell me what you see, the road, and tell me where it goes, in all directions.
And then when it transferred to Broadway, they had that same segment in the song. They altered the song a lot. They made the song a lot shorter for some reason, which is really sad because I actually really like that song. So they had that section.
So tell me what you want. I want a big life. And tell me what you see. I see a road. And tell me where it goes. In one direction.
In one direction, instead of all directions. And I think that's an interesting change to make, because they made a lot of changes when they transferred the show to Broadway. But I think that's a really interesting change, because in many ways, this is a show about determining your destiny in a way. Maybe not determining your destiny, but determining your legacy. I find it interesting that that the commentary in this song goes from, you know, Edward's gonna have this big life. Well, according to his stories, he's gonna have a big life, and the road goes in all directions in one version, but in another goes in one direction, and what that significance means. This, you know, sort of the road going in all directions means he could take any path. You know, he has to choose the one, sort of the less traveled by one. If we're quoting Robert Frost, he has to take the one less traveled by if he wants the big life. He has to be adventurous. He has to be willing to go into, you know, places of danger and fear, and, you know, come out on top with all these crazy stories. But with the one road image, with just the road going in one direction, it's almost saying you have a set destiny. It's an interesting thing for the show to say, because, you know, here we have Edward who's determining his own legacy by telling these stories, and, you know, we have his son trying to figure out the truth behind these stories and, you know, what really happened. So I wonder why the change in commentary happened really with this song, because when it comes to Big Fish, saying the road goes in all directions sort of says Edward's completely in the right, I guess. Like, you know, he's able to tell these stories to determine his legacy. You know, he chose this certain path. But the one road sort of makes it a darker image. Having the road that goes in one direction means, almost in a way, Edward has this set destiny that is, he's not going to have this big life. He's going to be the traveling salesman. He's going to be a sucky father. He's going to be a husband who at one point almost leaves his wife and moves in with his high school flame, which is a very, you know, suspenseful moment in the show in a way. He buys this house with his old high school flame, and they kiss, and he realizes, wait, no, I can't do this. I have to go back to my wife. So that road in one direction has this sort of dark side to it, that he's gonna be this mediocre guy, but he has this chance through telling these stories, I guess, to you know, make it better. The road in every direction makes it so that in Edward's stories, he is, you know, he can create his own reality. He can create his destiny. He can determine what it is. So him telling these stories is an act of hope in a way, you know, hoping that this is how he can be remembered. This will be his legacy. But him telling these stories when his road was pointing in that one direction, assumedly, you know, the image being to mediocrity, it's almost like this is an act of desperation. This is a man desperate to be remembered a certain way. This is a man desperate to be remembered as the good father, the good husband, which makes it all the more heartbreaking at the end when, you know, the time Will finally understands that desperation. He accepts it and, you know, tells the story of Edward's death for Edward, and allows himself to go into Edward's make-believe world and forgive Edward for, you know, the mistakes he made as a father and a husband. And it's Edward, you know, passing the torch to Will, saying, I know I screwed up. You know, let me pass this torch to you. I want you to be the storyteller, but I also want you to be a better man than I ever could be. and now Will's life is heading in this one direction, but he's able to add on to it. I don't know, it's an interesting change in the imagery, and it baffles me to this day, and I'm not doing the best job in this video of sort of expressing myself. This is very unscripted. I have class in about 10 minutes, 13 minutes. I have a math lecture I gotta go to. So this was sort of very impromptu, because this was just bugging me, and I needed to get this out. But yeah, it's such a puzzling little thing to me, and I think the message is, it changed from being, you can determine your destiny by doing X, Y, and Z, to you have a set destiny, what are you going to do with it? You know, making it an image, making it go from an image of hope and, you know, sort of laissez-faire to this image of, you know, desperation, and you have to make something out of this one road you have. Instead of, you know, you can take whatever path and you can choose to go down the, you know, the harder one or the more adventurous one or something. Just the way this change in imagery affects the theme of the show, you know, and adds a darker element once you go to Broadway and the road goes from all directions to one direction. I think it's powerful, but it also leads me to wonder why they made that change, and it's just fascinating to me. And again, that image affects the ending, because the image of the one road that Edward has to change makes the image of the one road that Edward has to take makes him more desperate, makes his character seem more vulnerable and less, you know, like just high and mighty and show-offish and egotistical. It makes him seem desperate, and it makes it more understandable why Will forgives him at the end. But it also sort of makes it sadder. Like, this is a man who knows he's screwed up and wants so hard to not be remembered for those mess-ups. And I think that makes it even more touching in a way. And seeing that at the end, then Will accepts him and, you know, validates that desperation, says, okay, I'll do this for you, I forgive you. It makes it even more heartbreaking that happens when Edward's dying, but it makes it all the more powerful that Will's able to move on and embrace Edward's legacy and build from it, keep going down that one road. It's a very thought-provoking image because, you know, it begs the question of us, why do we want to be remembered the way we want to be remembered? What are we going to do with that one road that merits us being remembered the way we want to be? Edward is a character that thrives on being a people-pleaser, thrives on bringing joy to others' lives, and that's why he told these stories, because he wants to be remembered as this man who changed people's lives for the better, like, in grand ways. He's scared of what will happen if his wife and son and his grandchild, who will never know him as the, you know, sort of the bad guy, the dad who sucked, the husband who was unfaithful. He's scared of what that means, even though he'll be gone. And that begs the question of us, why are we scared of how we'll be remembered when we're gone? Probably because we're all afraid of mortality. We're all afraid of going off into nothingness because we can't comprehend it. And that's what makes the ending of the show especially powerful, is that even though Edward's afraid of his mortality, he gets such a beautiful send-off, even if it's just a story, even if it's just made up. In his eyes, it's the perfect send-off because this is him being promised that legacy. All those characters are there. Will now has the ability to conjure up these characters, and he uses them to make Edward happy, which is really all a dying person needs. Just happiness and comfort in their dying moments, and really the legacy is just an afterthought, but with that promise, Edward's able to let go, and he's able to go into the real world of death, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I want to hear what you all think about this. You know, what is your take on the every direction versus one direction motif? What is, you know, why do you think they changed the image? Do any of you know any background to why they made that change? And what is your take on Big Fish in general? Because it is a bit of a divisive show. Some people are like, oh, I love it, it's gorgeous. Some people are like, no, it's cheap sentimentality and it's stupid fluff and it's too wholesome. So I want to know. Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you all next video. Check out Big Fish. Check out, you know, specifically the Witch song. Check out specifically the ending, and check out the whole album. Read the book. Watch the movie. I can't recommend this show enough, especially as we just examined, especially with all this deep imagery and this deep meaning that makes us really reflect on our own lives. So that's all for me for now. Have fun. Have a good day. See you later.
So don't you want to see what's next? What's waiting in the void? You may be disappointed, but you may